Before we dive in, drop a quick eye in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching. Relzar, VO, smooth, almost amused. To the representatives of United Earth, we acknowledge your prior cooperation. Commencing the next cycle, designated council fleets will begin regulated extraction of Earth's marine biomass and mineral crust. Timetables are attached. Compliance is assumed. Malcolm Ashford stood with his hands behind his back as the holographic transmission solidified. The seal of the Galactic Council spun once, then dissolved into the face of High Consul Relzar, a Thalvani, tall, skeletal, and regal, with segmented emerald skin that shimmered faintly under the light. Lidless eyes blinked out of sync above a mouth that never quite closed. Relzar offered a slow, calculated smile. This is not merely an honor. It is a responsibility. Your world will finally serve a purpose greater than itself. The transmission ended. Ashford's body tensed, the muscles in his face holding back the words everyone else wanted to spit. He didn't blink. Around him, the silence fractured as murmurs turned into voices, and voices edged toward outrage. Admiral Henrik Sato stepped forward, his face carved from stone. He just assigned a harvest date like we're farmland. General Marcus Greer slammed a gloved fist onto a console. They're not asking anymore. They never were, said Ashford, finally turning. A soft tone echoed through the chamber as a second set of doors opened. More leaders entered, military commanders, global defense ministers, strategic advisors. No journalists, no cameras. Just men and women used to making choices the rest of the planet wasn't ready to hear. General Tobias Moon, head of orbital logistics, took his seat without a word. Across from him, Admiral Rahman crossed his arms, his eyes locked on the now blank holographic display. Ashford raised his voice. We're live. Level 4 protocols. This council is in emergency session. The chamber dimmed slightly, bringing full focus to the central platform. Holograms sparked to life above each representative station. Fleet positions, energy resource maps, political affiliations across the globe. Ashford stepped forward. Let's skip the ceremony. You all saw it. They didn't even pretend to negotiate. Because they think we won't do anything, Rahman added. Ashford nodded. They see hesitation. That's not their fault. It's ours. They've been softening us up for years, said Greer. First they taxed our colonies, then our off-world trade. Now they want our oceans. What's next? The marrow in our bones? It's not just policy anymore, said Sato. It's conquest with paperwork. They expect us to protest and fold, Moon muttered. Again, Ashford's voice was level, but steel-edged. They think we're too divided, too bureaucratic, too human. And maybe we are, said Rahman. But they still underestimate what that means. Ashford turned back to the center. I'll go. Muin blinked. What? Ashford stepped fully onto the central floor. I'll return to the council. In person. We request a special session. Face to face. You think that'll work? Asked Greer. No, Ashford replied. But I'm not going there to plead. I'm going to put this on the record. Sato crossed his arms. They'll call it defiance. They already have. Rahman looked up. What if they don't let you leave? Ashford didn't hesitate. Then we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. Greer leaned forward. You realize what happens if they detain you. Ashford looked him dead in the eye. Then they make my point for me. Moon's jaw clenched. And the rest of us. You prepare, Ashford said quietly. Thoroughly, no announcements. If there's even a chance to stop this without blood, I'll take it. But if not, he looked to Sato. We make damn sure we're ready. The room fell into a weighted pause. Then Rahman spoke. You'll need a diplomatic team. Light escort only. Ashford nodded. 5 diplomats, myself included, and a small crew. No major weapons, no threats. Just eyes and ears. Sato moved toward a side console. We'll prep a stealth corridor. No media, no civilian chatter. I'll coordinate the launch. Ashford didn't smile, but his voice softened by half a degree. Thank you. He walked toward the outgoing communications terminal. With a breath, he activated the line to the Galactic Council. Seconds passed. Then the seal appeared again, shifting into Relzar's face. Ah, Chancellor Ashford, the Thalvani drawled. Your silence was beginning to feel familiar. I'm requesting a special session, Ashford said. Emergency status. In person. Off-screen, the shape of another counselor leaned into frame, Marxian thick exoskeletal ridges. No greeting, just a stare. After a long pause, Relzar tilted his head slightly. Your arrival is anticipated. We shall accommodate. The feed cut. Ashford turned from the screen. We move now. 2 days later, the launch platform was surrounded by silence and steel. No cameras, no flags, just cold air and the low hum of distant generators. The diplomatic shuttle stood on the pad, golden-shelled, low profile, built for speed and subtlety, not defense. Ashford stood near the ramp, his coat flapping in the wind. Sito approached with quick, measured steps. Your transponder's clean, direct corridor to council space. No detours. Ashford nodded. And if we lose contact? You won't. Roman followed close behind, offering a small case. Encrypted relay. Short range only. Just in case you need to say something fast. Ashford took it without comment. Behind them, the other 4 delegates boarded one by one. Envoys Keller and Dawes, both stone-faced veterans of interspecies diplomacy, and 2 aides, Lauren and Wexler, former analysts turned field observers. The shuttle's small crew was already inside, silent and sharp-eyed. No rookies, no dead weight. Sato kept his voice low. If they try anything, if they so much as twitch wrong, then you'll know what to do, Ashford finished. Raman gave a tight nod. Don't give them a reason. I won't, Ashford said. But they've already written the ending. I'm just walking them to the stage. Greer, arriving last, offered a rare grunt of approval. Let them look into your eyes when they try to explain this garbage. Ashford offered one last glance to the men he'd spent decades building trust with. Keep Earth steady. Don't react. Not yet. Sato's voice was calm. We'll be ready. Ashford turned, walked up the ramp, and entered the shuttle. The hatch sealed behind him, with a deep thud. Seconds later, the engines ignited, and the ship lifted through the clouds. No broadcast, no anthem. Just 5 men leaving Earth for a chamber full of vipers. The shuttle drifted into the outer perimeter of council space under full diplomatic transponder status. Escort ships, sleek, crescent-shaped, marked with the council's emblem, flanked them without a word. No comms, just presence. Malcolm Ashford stood at the viewport, arms crossed behind his back, watching the looming structure ahead. The Citadel of Accord wasn't built for beauty. It was massive, layered, constructed like a fortress, masquerading as bureaucracy. Tall, spiked towers lined its outer ring, each one representing a founding species. Ships of various makes orbited lazily around it, some docked, others idling. Each design was alien, but the formation was unmistakably defensive. Keller joined him by the glass. Friendly welcome. Ashford didn't look at him. Feels like they already know what I'll say. Then say it anyway. Keller said. Loud enough they can't pretend they didn't hear. The shuttle docked with a shudder. A mechanical hiss filled the air as the ramp lowered into a receiving bay bathed in cool, sterile light. Waiting at the bottom stood a welcoming party. 8 guards in ceremonial armor and 1 diplomatic aide. The aide stepped forward. She was hoary, tall, serpentine, with translucent green skin and a spiraled head crest. Her voice was musical but distant. Chancellor Ashford, welcome back to the Citadel of Accord. The High Council awaits you in session. Your credentials have been logged. Please surrender external comm links and personal defense devices. Ashford handed over the small case. We brought words, not weapons. She bowed slightly, and turned. "Follow me." The walk through the station was a parade of quiet tension. Ornate banners hung from polished walls, displaying the crests of over 40 species. Some Ashford recognized, some he didn't. Every hallway had guards posted, the kind who didn't smile, the kind who watched everything and said nothing. They were led through a tall chamber that opened into the council's core, a wide, circular hall with a stepped floor leading down into a pit ringed with tiered seats, each occupied by a councilor or their proxy. The chamber lights dimmed. Spotlights tracked Ashford and his team as they descended. In the center, atop the raised platform, stood High Consul Relzar. His segmented green skin caught the light with a subtle ripple, and his narrow eyes blinked out of sync. His jaw looked as if it were always holding back a smile, or something worse. To his right, the Marxian counselor stood motionless, his armor-like shell-ridged and dull face obscured behind a heavy bone mask fused to his upper frame. Another, draped in layered robes, had rows of violet feathers that twitched slightly with every breath, and narrow, hooked fingers that drummed against the stone desk in rhythmic impatience. A third, lanky and pale with jointless limbs, and a face that pulsed around a cluster of moving tendrils, watched Ashford without blinking, head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Chancellor Ashford," Relzar said, his voice amplified but calm. "Your punctuality is noted. Speak." Ashford stepped forward, voice steady. "I stand before this council on behalf of the people of Earth. Your recent declaration to begin harvesting Earth's oceans and resources was made without negotiation, without consent, and without respect." His ripple moved through the chamber. Some counselors leaned forward, others reclined, visibly disinterested. Ashford continued, "We are still members of this council. We have honored treaties, paid tariffs, supported joint operations, and we have voiced concerns. Many of them consistently ignored." The Jebakari counselor clicked her beak and smirked. "And now you fly here with outrage in your voice and expect the council to what? Apologize?" "We expect fairness," Ashford said flatly. "But let's not pretend. This isn't a debate. It's theater. And you already sold the tickets." The Marxian counselor grunted, low and amused. "You came all this way to deliver complaints. You should have sent a recording." "Perhaps we were generous too long," said another voice from the circle. A Sahari delegate, golden-skinned with iridescent eyes. "Perhaps your usefulness expired." Ashford scanned the chamber. A few counselors avoided eye contact. Others watched with detached amusement. The divide was obvious, lines already drawn. "There is still a path forward," Ashford said. "You rescind this decree. You negotiate properly, as equals. Or this council declares itself a dominion of tyranny. And that choice will echo beyond this chamber." Laughter broke from a Chrysal representative, hulking, spiked, more beast than diplomat. "Humans threaten now with what? Farming machines? Lecture harder. Maybe that'll scare us." Relzar raised a hand, and the voices fell quiet. "This council appreciates Earth's contributions," he said, measured. "But your world is no longer central, no longer essential. You resist integration. You delay progress. And now you posture." A flick of his hand, and holographic documents materialized, projections of Earth's economic output, fleet readiness, political instability. "Your strength is a myth. You've enjoyed sovereignty longer than most council members. That era ends now." Ashford stepped closer to the central podium. His tone shifted, cooler, sharper. "This was always the plan, wasn't it? Make Earth believe it had a seat while you hollowed out the floor beneath it. You didn't want dialogue today. You wanted a photo." Relzar tilted his head. "Is this your final plea, Chancellor?" Ashford looked around the chamber. The smirks, the glares, the averted gazes. His own team standing silent behind him. Waiting. He exhaled through his nose. "No." Then louder, clearer. "Enough." The word landed like a stone in water. No raised voice, no drama, just finality. "You weren't here to listen. You were here to finish the script. You built a stage, pointed the lights, and called it diplomacy. This isn't a council. It's a courtroom, and you already wrote the verdict. Rulzer leaned back without blinking. Very well. He turned to the assembly. By directive of the High Council, and with majority support, Earth is hereby designated non-compliant. The privileges of membership are revoked. Their representatives stand in violation of Council accord. He gestured. Guards began to move, 6 of them from separate entryways, coordinated and slow. Chancellor Malcolm Ashford, Relzar declared, you and your delegation are under detainment for sedition and obstruction of Council directives. You are hereby remanded until further assessment. Ashford didn't move. Behind him, Keller and Dawes shifted slightly, not in panic, just bracing. The guards advanced, not rushing, but deliberate, synchronized, ceremonial armor gleaming, no weapons drawn. This wasn't an arrest. It was a spectacle. Humiliation dressed as order. The lead guard stepped forward and held out a pair of restraints, long, curved bands of glowing alloy, unlike any human cuffs. Elegant. Alien. Ashford glanced down at the restraints, then slowly raised his hands. Make sure your report includes how polite we were, he said dryly. Keller smirked. Just once. As the restraint snapped into place around Ashford's wrists, he raised his arm slightly, adjusting the collar of his diplomatic robe. A flick of his finger brushed the lapel communicator. Small, discreet. To anyone watching, he looked like he was just fixing the fit. But the signal was sent. Begin it, he muttered under his breath. The guards turned the humans around and began escorting them from the chamber. No struggle, no resistance, just the slow walk of men already outnumbered, but not outplayed. Of them, Relzar watched silently. He had no idea what had just started. Far from the citadel of Accord, Admiral Henrik Sato stood at the center of the UED's underground command deck, eyes locked on a single pulsing icon on the screen in front of him. The signal had come through. Clean, coded, unmistakable. Chancellor Ashford had made the call. He turned to his comms officer. Confirm it. The young lieutenant, pale under the low red lights of the ops room, gave a single nod. It's real, sir. Phrase and cadence match. Operation Enough is Green. Sato didn't hesitate. Do it. Across the chamber, a flurry of coordinated movement kicked off like a synchronized storm. Operators swiped across floating hollow panels. Lights flared, and encrypted command trees rippled through secure lines across the quadrant. Patch through to Commanders Halden, Moretz, and Grimm, Sato ordered. A panel slid open, revealing 3 split feeds, each one showing a stern-faced man framed by the quiet tension of distant outposts. Halden stood aboard his vessel, shadows from a crimson-hued nebula streaking across the bulkhead behind him. Moretz, older and broader, stood in front of a tactical projection glowing against the rough stone walls of an underground command shelter. Grimm, lean, and sharp-eyed, sat in the pilot's chair of a stealth carrier veiled beneath the upper clouds of a pale blue giant. Sato didn't offer greetings. It started, coordinates are set. Coordinates are set. Go. Halden gave a crisp nod. About time. Moretz cracked his neck. Copy. We've waited long enough. Grimm grinned faintly. Let's wake the galaxy. The feeds cut. The command deck rumbled beneath Sato's boots as launch sequences began. No one needed a second order. They'd been ready for this. Every part of the operation had been rehearsed in silence, behind closed doors, under dummy protocols, and phantom drills. An analyst looked up from her console, eyes wide with tension. They're all moving, sir. Every ship's in position. This storm's officially rolling. Sato didn't look away from the map as the UED's full strike package lit up like a storm front. It won't take that long. In the council's high chamber, the discussion had shifted from formalities to something more personal. I warned you they'd posture, said the Jevikari delegate, her feathers flicking with invisible irritation. Humans are emotionally unstable. They pretend they're rational, but they hold grudges like tribal packs. The Marxian exhaled through the slits in his mask. Grudges or memory? Another counselor, gray-skinned with translucent ridges along his spine, leaned in. They've been quiet too long. You think that was surrender? Relzar raised his hand. They lack the reach. Their fleets are scattered, their resources strained. At best, they'll issue complaints. At worst, they'll try some symbolic protest. Either way, it ends here. The Vegzari tilted his head slightly. And if they don't stop, they can't reach us, Relzar said flatly. Even if they tried, our perimeter defenses would halt them before they breached Council airspace. Around the chamber, some counselors exchanged glances. A few kept their gaze on the floor, uncomfortable, but silent. They weren't ready to speak against the tide. Not yet. Then the chamber trembled. At first it was subtle. A vibration in the floor panels. A low hum in the columns. Then a sharp tone pierced the air. An alert, not ceremonial, not scheduled. Operators burst into the chamber, eyes wide, voices rushed. Council perimeter has been breached. Multiple contacts coming from dead space sectors. They're already inside the second ring. What is happening? One of the senior aides asked, voice raised. An older counselor turned to the operator. Who is it? The operator swallowed hard. The humans, High Lord. Their fleet. It's here. Relzar turned to the chamber doors as the light shifted to red. Above the station, the void erupted. Sato's fleet didn't arrive from the main corridor. They emerged from the dark from blind spots, abandoned lanes, and gravitational dead zones mapped by human engineers who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. There was no warning, no buildup, just sudden presence. Dozens of warships cut through space with sharp, aggressive intent. The lead carrier, a red, angular titan named Excalibur, pierced the orbital grid before the Council defenses could realign. Sato stood on the command deck of the Excalibur, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the shifting battle map in front of him. Colored vectors, ship markers, heat zones, all in motion. Targeting aligned, came Captain Reed's voice through the comms. His face flickered on a side display, lit by firelight from his bridge. We're set on their outer wall. On another feed, Captain Ewan leaned forward from his command chair, shadows cutting across his sharp features. Their batteries are scrambling. Sloppy deployment. Looks like they didn't expect visitors. They didn't expect to bleed today, Sato replied. Let's change that. He turned toward his comms officer. Signal the strike. Execute the wedge. Reed's voice came back without hesitation. With pleasure. The human fleet shifted instantly, splitting into 3 angles of assault. Reed's formation dove on the orbital batteries flanking the station's upper towers. Eugen's group cut straight through the shield perimeter, tearing past diplomatic bays. Sato's spearhead surged toward the station's central axis. Focus fire on the relay bands. Ewan ordered from his post. We blind them before we bruise them. In the black, flashes ignited like a thunderstorm. The Council's defense turrets began to stir. But too late. Their predictive arrays were misfiring. Their timing off. Human ships were already weaving through patterns they hadn't accounted for. One of the station's upper towers erupted in a plume of fire and fractured alloy. Debris spun outward as alarms flashed across the Council grid. What was supposed to be an untouchable ring of power had become a fractured shell. Defense systems staggered between protocols. Council warships clustered in hesitation, still reacting instead of responding. And Sato, he was just getting started. The first tower crumbled, and the rest of the station lit up like a hornet's nest. Batteries rotated, beams fired in blind arcs, but the humans were already threading through the gaps, shifting lines faster than the defenses could compute. On the Excalibur's command deck, Admiral Henrik Sato didn't move from his post. His eyes stayed fixed on the roiling battlefield map, lines of red and blue colliding, breaking, reforming. Outer layers breaking, came Captain Reed's voice from his feed, static warping the edges. Behind him, crewmen shouted and sparks flew across the bridge. They're collapsing in on themselves. Keep pressing, Seto answered. Don't give them time to breathe. Another voice cut in. Captain Yuan. His tone was clipped, precise. They're shifting a cluster to cover the southern arc. If we swing through, we'll take the brunt. Red barked a laugh through the comms. Since when do we back off from a swing? Yuan didn't rise to the bait. It's a choke point. Their fire will stack. Seto raised his hand slightly, silencing both feeds. Then we stack harder, drive through. For a moment, nothing but the distant thrum of engines filled the bridge. Then Reed's grin split across his battered face. Copy that. Punching through. In the black, his wing veered hard into the kill zone. Energy flares painted the void. Bursts slammed into human hulls, shields sparking, plates peeling, and still the ship surged forward, refusing to break. At the last second, the formation fractured, splitting into a scatter that tore past the overlapping lines. Council turrets, primed for a single clustered target, fired into empty space. Human ships reformed on the other side, hammering the turrets' exposed flanks until their cores burst apart in spinning shards. Inside the council chamber, the thunder of the battle carried through the walls like a heartbeat. Rilzar gripped the railing of his platform, mandibles tightening. Contain them, the Javikari delegate hissed, feathers twitching. Their numbers are not vast. They should already be splintered. A Marxian aide sprinted into the chamber, his armored chest plate scuffed. High Consul, some of the comm signals are failing. We cannot reach the Third Fleet. The channels are interfered. Another operator shouted from his console. The signals, they're blocked. No, wait. Some are slipping through. Counselors leaned forward, panic breaking their mask of arrogance. The Vexari delegates' tendrils writhed in agitation. Interference from primitives. Not interference, Rilzar snapped. Defiance. He turned to his inner circle. Send the personal wings now. We don't wait for authorization. Across the chamber, a few counselors exchanged uneasy looks. Some kept silent, eyes betraying the fear they didn't dare speak aloud. On the human side, the fleet was cutting deeper. The Excalibur drove its spear into the central ring, hammer-class frigates flanking, tearing lines in the plating. Contact left. Yuan's voice snapped through. Consul ships pivoting from the east. If they close, we'll be boxed. His image flickered on the display. Jaw tight. Eyes calculating. Admiral, if we pivot now, we can evade. Reed's feed crackled in. Evasion's not going to win us this fight. We hit harder than they can count. Sato didn't blink. Stay the course. Break their circle. Yuan's lips tightened, but he gave a sharp nod. Understood. On screen, human vessels swung wide, then collapsed inward in perfect timing, slicing into the council formation from two sides. Caught between crossfire, the alien ships twisted in panic, colliding with each other. Their perfect symmetry turned into chaos. A second station tower ruptured, venting fire and bodies into the dark. The humans pressed in. Inside the chamber, panic shifted into argument. They'll break through, one counselor shouted, eyes darting. Another slammed his hand against a console. Then why aren't reinforcements here? The operator at the comms swallowed. We're detecting outgoing signals. Some are being jammed, but others made it through. The console's line was among them. Rilzar's eyes narrowed. Good. Then aid is on the way. The Sahari delegate leaned back, voice cold. If they survive long enough to arrive. Rilzar's mandibles flared, but he didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the holographic projection above the chamber. Human ships carving paths where none should exist. Back aboard the Excalibur, alarms barked in rapid succession. A comms officer turned to Seto, voice urgent. We intercepted transmissions, Admiral. Several signals from inside the chamber. Some jammed, but others clean. Reinforcements will come. Her face glowed pale in the red lights. We know who sent them. Sayito's expression didn't shift. He spoke with the weight of stone. Good. Inform the other commanders. He stepped closer to the viewport, watching another council cruiser break apart in fire. His fists clenched, voice low and final. This circus ends today. The second tower's fireball still burned against the void when the next storm arrived. Sensors screamed across the Excalibur's bridge, warning of fresh signatures boiling out of subspace lanes. Reinforcements, Council fleets, heavy wings called in from loyalist strongholds, had come to break the human advance. Contacts. Captain Reed's voice cut through the comms, the feed shaking with movement. Full formations dropping in on our starboard. On another channel, Captain Ewan's face appeared, pale in the light of his tactical screens. Multiple groups. They're trying to box us between the station and their relief wings. Around him, the map lit up with red clusters blooming like malignant growths. Any other fleet would have panicked. Not Satal. He stood anchored, arms folded behind his back, gaze cutting straight through the chaos. Hold formation, Sato said. Calm, almost casual. They'll expect us to scatter. We don't. Reed laughed, a raw edge in his tone. You're telling me we let them think they've got us cornered? Exactly, Sato answered. Bleed them before they close the jaws. Human ships braced as the new fleet surged in. Council vessels, long and spined, cascaded fire from their flanks. Missiles streaked in swarms. Beams lashed across the darkness. Explosions peppered the outer edge of the human wedge. But instead of breaking, Seto's fleet pivoted like a blade, forcing the enemy fire into angles where their own crossfire struck friendly hulls. The Council's neat formations tore into each other in the confusion. On the bridge of the Excalibur, a young sensor officer snapped her head up. Admiral, secondary spikes. More inbound. Sano didn't even turn. That's ours. The void ripped open again. 3 more human fleets burst into the theater. Arcs of light tearing across the black as if space itself had been split open by force. The shockwave of their arrival rolled through the battlefield. For a heartbeat, the Council reinforcements hesitated. Formations wavered. Command channels flooded with disbelief. Then the killing began. Hardened's squadron descended like a storm from high orbit, hulls glowing from the re-entry burn. His ships drove straight into the back ranks of the Council's reinforcement wings, tearing through unprepared cruisers. Explosions cascaded outward, as 1, 2, then 5 alien vessels buckled under the hammering impact of sustained fire. In seconds, the rear guard was no longer a formation. It was a graveyard. Rear lines open. Halden's voice thundered over comms. We're cutting straight through. Push them forward into the guns of the others. Merritt's answered before Sato could. His heavy cruisers lumbered into the fray like juggernauts, each salvo dropping with the weight of mountains. Their barrages punched holes clean through the enemy wall, collapsing entire wings in a roar of flame and spinning debris. The Council's midline fractured, shattering into broken shards as officers screamed for regrouping. Merritt's gravel voice growled through the channel. Hold the gap. Drive them into the dirt. From beneath the station's shadow, Grimm made his move. His stealth carriers surged upward in a vertical climb, engines flaring as their strike wings unleashed coordinated fire. They carved into the enemy's underbelly, rupturing shields and detonating reactors. One Council dreadnought erupted in a sphere of light so bright it blinded half the grid for a full second. Grimm's calm voice cut through the storm. Lower flank gutted. They're bleeding out. The alien reinforcements staggered, boxed from all sides, trapped between hammers they never saw coming. Their so-called surprise was dismembered before it even had a chance to swing. Form the pincer, Halden ordered across the open net. Crush the stragglers between us. Already on it, Grimm replied, his tone sharp, cutting their escape routes. Then we finish this fast, Moritz growled. Reed's laughter came ragged through the comms as his own ships pressed the attack. God, I love being early to a funeral. On the Excalibur, Sato's eyes narrowed as his fleet enveloped the Council wings, every maneuver precisely where he had envisioned it. No survivors for this act. Cut them down. The order hit like fuel poured on fire. Human ships surged in every vector, weaving impossible patterns, breaking ranks only to reform in lethal synchronization. They struck at blind spots, slipped through firing arcs, vanished, then reappeared with killing intent. Council ships, once disciplined, fired wild, colliding with each other in the confusion. Every turn brought another detonation. Every gap was exploited. What was meant to be an ambush had become a slaughter. And in that slaughter, the legend of humanity was carved deeper into the bones of the galaxy. Inside the council chamber, the scene was chaos in a different way. Holographic monitors filled the air, showing the unraveling disaster outside. Ships burned. Allies screamed across channels. Reinforcements shattered before they could stabilize. One counselor clutched his mantle, voice shrill. "We must evacuate now. Call our transports. Get us clear before." Another slammed a clawed hand against the table. "Cowardice! We hold this station. We call again for aid. More fleets will come." The Javikari delegate's feathers bristled as she stared at the monitors. "More fleets! Look at them! Your reinforcements are ash before they even arrive." The Vixari's tendrils writhed, voice low and venomous. How did they know? How could they have prepared for this? The operator at the comms turned pale, his voice breaking. The humans, they anticipated the jump vectors. They're cutting through like they knew every angle. Another counselor shook his head in disbelief. What? How could they know? Relzar's mandibles snapped shut, face rigid. They can bleed us, but they will not take this chamber. We stand, we resist. Call again for reinforcements. I want every loyal fleet in the sector. But High Consul, an aide started. Do it, Relzar roared, slamming the railing with both hands. The chamber dissolved into frantic activity. Some delegates demanding escape, others clinging to defiance. The split was clear. Panic on one side, arrogance on the other. And through it all, the humans outside drove closer, each strike hammering the inevitability of what was coming. Back in the black, the Council's so-called relief force had been reduced to burning wreckage. Human ships roared through the debris fields, breaking what remained of enemy order. Where the aliens had brought structure and doctrine, the humans answered with raw ingenuity. Maneuvers no simulator had trained for. Moves no doctrine allowed. And every time, it worked. On the Excalibur's bridge, the comms filled with clipped reports of victory, Reed's booming laugh, Yeoman's curt confirmations, Halden's steady updates, Moretz's gravel voice giving the count of destroyed wings, Grimm's sharp commands as his carriers tore upward through the chaos. Sato didn't need to answer them all. He simply watched, eyes narrowed, as the Council's vaunted reinforcements disintegrated before the combined weight of humanity. And with calm certainty, he spoke one line into the comms, carried to every captain in range. Now we tighten the noose. The battlefield was already littered with burning wrecks. When the Council reinforcements tried to rally for a second push, the void around the station churned with wreckage, splintered hulls, shattered towers, glowing trails of debris spiraling into the dark. But the fight wasn't done. More clusters of ships drove in, desperate to break the human wedge before it reached the station's core. On the Excalibur's command deck, Admiral Henrik Sato leaned over the shifting battle map. Red marks bloomed on the flanks, gathering for another encirclement. Blue markers, human ships, pushed hard, thinned but relentless. Fresh groups, outer rim, reported Grimm. His voice sharp over comms. His feed flickered with sparks behind him as his carrier rattled from near misses. They're trying to reform a wall. Halden cut in, calm, even under fire. A wall's only as good as the first crack. Reed's voice followed, laughter laced with strain. Then let's make it a canyon. The human fleet shifted as one. Meritz's cruisers rolled forward, broadside batteries hammering in unison, tearing the first row of enemy ships apart. Flashes ignited across the flank as alien vessels folded inward, fire cascading between them like dominoes. At the same time, Grimm's stealth wings struck upward from the debris fields below, gutting engines and detonating reactors from behind. Explosions staggered the formation, breaking the wall before it had even braced. They're bleeding, Moretz growled. Keep hitting. But the Council fought back with fury. Lines of spiked warships surged forward, beams crossing the void in a net of fire. One human frigate vanished in a bloom of white as its hull cracked in half. Another spun, venting bodies and flame before slamming into an enemy cruiser and taking both down in fire. For every alien ship that burned, a human crew paid the cost. Pressure's stacking. Ewan snapped across comms. If they lock that door, we're the ones trapped inside. Seto's voice was calm, steady, the anchor in the storm. Then don't let them close it. Find the break. And the break came. Hardened squadron, smaller and faster, feinted retreat, drifting just long enough to bait the pursuing Council flank. Then, with a sudden turn, his ship spun into the blind arc of the larger vessels. They dove under the firing lines, unleashed concentrated fire into the exposed reactor housings, and split the flank clean in half. Alien ships tore away from each other in panic, colliding as they tried to stabilize. There's the hole, Halden barked. Tear it wider before they blink. Sato didn't hesitate. All wings. Drive through. Make it ugly. Make it fast. We're going in. The order ripped through the fleet like a current. Engines flared. Formations dissolved into a rushing surge. Human ships clawed into the breach, weaving between burning hulks, cutting their way to the station. The void lit with overlapping detonations as Council defenders broke under the weight of the charge. The once impenetrable perimeter fractured into rubble, and the humans forced their spear point into the heart of the defense grid. On the citadel of Accord, chaos ruled the chamber. The floor shook under bombardment. Consoles sparked, and the holographic displays screamed red with losses. Operators cried over each other. Reports blending into a chorus of disaster. They're through the perimeter, one shouted, his crest rising in panic. We can't contain them. Another voice broke, high and desperate. They'll breach the station itself. High,